Hello, my name is Greg Andrus. I'm the Vice President of the Democratic Party of Evanston. This is part of our video interview series with all of the municipal candidates for this upcoming election cycle. I'm here today with Matthew Mitchell, who's running for 8th Ward Alderman. If you're not a member yet, you can join on our website at evanstondems.com. You can either join as a dues-paying member, or if you'd like to volunteer to get your membership that way, we have some volunteer opportunities coming up, and you can reach out to me on that. So for those of you who remember our previous endorsement sessions, we typically all meet in a big room down at the Unitarian Church and hear from the candidates for 2-3 minutes, and then get to cast our votes. Obviously, we can't do that this year. So we're sitting down to record these interviews with each of the candidates so that you can listen to them and hear what they have to say. So Matthew, why don't we start it off and just take a few minutes and introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you, Greg, and thank you to the DPOE. I'm happy to be here tonight. My name is Matthew Mitchell. I'm running for 8th Ward Alderman. I'm an attorney. I was born and raised in Evanston. My wife and I live on the south side of town with our 2 sons, who are a kindergartner and a 1st grader at Oakton Elementary. Go Cougars. I've been involved in the city of Evanston since we moved here 6 years ago. We moved back when my oldest was 6 months old, and I feel like I'm the best advocate for the 8th Ward. I'm really ready to do the work, that Evanston needs.
Well, thank you. So the first question, how well do you feel the city of Evanston has upheld its goal of assessing decisions and policies through a lens of equity?
I think it's hit or miss. I think oftentimes the words get spoken, but there's not a process for it. I think as this interview goes on, you're going to see that I'm a process person. And I think the city of Evanston needs to do a better job of instituting a decision-making process that acknowledges equity and acknowledges how decisions are going to affect our most vulnerable residents. I think we're talking about systemic inequity, systemic inequality, and the people who get left behind are always the same people that get left behind. I think as part of the structural change, to actually change that going forward, we as a city need to institute a decision-making process that acknowledges equity.
Okay. So as an alderman, how would you go about listening to and weighing conflicting calls from constituents, some of whom may want more of a conventional police presence versus those who want less?
So, I think we can talk about this in just the police context, and I think we could talk about this in any context. So, when different constituents are expressing conflicting ideas, or for me, how I narrow it down is expressing their needs and interests. So I think with some further communication, engagement, and maybe even crosstalk of people who are conflicting, you can talk and address different constituents' needs and interests and see how you can address those needs and interests without disenfranchising somebody who feels differently. And I think that's certainly true in the police context. I am very interested in police policy. I'm very interested in more civilian involvement in police policy. And while we're talking about police, there was a tragic event that happened in the 8th Ward and throughout the city of Chicago yesterday, where a number of people were killed by a gunman who was eventually killed by the Evanston Police Department. And it's an example of when we do need an armed police response. And I'm thankful for the Evanston Police's swift response. I also think this is an opportunity for us to show our process. There should be a thorough and transparent investigation with civilian input.
So do you feel that the city has done enough to assure Black and brown constituents that they are not being unfairly policed and that individual officers there's some accountability there?
No, I don't think the city's done enough. I was the chair of a committee, City of Evanston Committee, Citizen Police Complaint Assessment Committee. It met from 2017 to 2018 and evaluated how complaints against police officers are made, and then also made recommendations for how the city can do that better. And as part of that, we really had a lot of access to how the City of Evanston Police Department actually does its internal investigations. And at the time, there was a lot of pushback from the police to give us access. And at, about a year in, we were asking for documents and the police weren't giving them. And we had a sit-down meeting, and it was me, the city attorney, the police chief, Eddington at the time, and a city staff member. And we finally came to an agreement where they'd provide the committee with redacted but complete investigative material into complaints against police officers. And so for the first time, we were able to actually see the entire investigation, original investigative reports, original transcripts of the interviews with everybody. It was impressive. I was impressed with the thoroughness of the investigation. But it took a year of fighting to be able to see that. So I think the Evanston Police Department, when it does do a good job, should do better at doing that transparently to reassure folks that they do a thorough job. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. So the next question is actually also on police police accountability. So FOIAs, especially those made of the Evanston Police Department, have become something of a contentious issue lately in City Council. What do you believe the city can do to promote transparency and accountability when it comes to police FOIAs?
So I think the City of Evanston needs to follow state law regarding FOIAs. If the City of Evanston does not, there are remedies in the law that allow for penalties. I would not like to see the City of Evanston paying civil penalties for not complying with FOIA. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are strict rules that need to be complied with. If they aren't, I think it's certainly within the individuals requesting their rights to pursue those remedies. And that's not what I want. What I want is city to comply with state law and provide transparency to requesters. I mean, for me, this is a pretty anodyne question. It's, the city needs to comply with the law.
Okay. So you had mentioned civilian involvement earlier. There have been some critics of the current system for investigating the police department, police misconduct, which is done by the board appointed by the mayor and approved by city council. Do you believe that Evanston should have an oversight board that's independent of the mayor and city council for the police department?
I believe there should be more civilian involvement in police oversight, whether that's a civilian review board that has investigative power, subpoena power, or whether you use different tools to address that. That's not most important to me. When I was the chair of the CPCAC, we made 4 recommendations, and the overarching theme is that there needs to be more civilian involvement in police policy. And we made 4 recommendations, of which 1 has been instituted, and that's actually specifically the Civilian Review Board. There was a Civilian Review Board before, and when you look kind of academically at police oversight, what a Civilian Review Board does, what it addresses, is the transparency argument. It opens the door to allow citizens sunlight into the process of complaints against police officers. And the previous CPAC did not do a good job of that. And it had nothing to do with the individuals who made up the board. It was the way it was structured. And so our recommendation was to shut it down and start from scratch. That was instituted by the city, and the new Civilian Review Board has just kind of been instituted in 2020, and their work was slowed down by COVID, just as they were kind of getting off the ground, hitting their stride. So I have deep hope that they find good grounding where they can do their work effectively and provide transparency effectively. Personally, I think there's other tools you could use that would do a better job, like a police auditor or an ombudsman who wouldn't be elected, but would be an appointed independent person outside of the police department, reviewing police policy and police procedure and incidents of misconduct.
Okay. So the final question I have on policing, recently the city of Evanston made use of the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System to respond to protests. And this is specifically on the Halloween incident over by the university. Do you feel that the level of oversight the city has over NEPAS is sufficient? And what would you do to make this relationship more transparent and accessible to Evanston residents?
I do not believe that Evanston has enough control when NEPAS is operating within Evanston. I think it's problematic. Evanston has very high standards for policing and very high expectations. And, you know, all the work that we're doing with our police department, it needs to be reflected in whoever is on our streets enforcing the law. You know, there's no reason any police officer should be unidentified on the streets. If they're enforcing the law in Evanston, they need to be under Evanston's control. That needs you know, what they do needs to be accessible through FOIA. And, you know, at the end of the day, the chief of police in Evanston is responsible. I don't think there's enough oversight right now. And I think it's troubling. And I found Chief Cook's explanation insufficient.
Okay. So the next few questions are a little bit, stepping back a bit, a little bit broader. Is there anything about the culture of our city government that you would like to see changed?
I'd like to see a move back towards civility. I think the political climate in our country has become more combative over the last 5 years, certainly, but, you know, even back over the last 10 years. We're all on the same team here, and I think we can get more done without the lionization and antagonizing of, and that's a two-way street. You know, it goes towards elected officials and elected officials towards members of the community. I also would like to see the city of Evanston be a great place to work, and it is and can be in certain sectors, and has a lot of room for improvement in others. But I think for city of Evanston employees, having it be a great employment opportunity, a great place to work, where folks are excited about their job, excited of how it's structured, that's going to reflect back to the public.
Thank you. So the next two questions we got from a member are sort of about the city government itself. Can you comment on the benefits and the challenges of Evanston's home rule status? And how do you feel about our current council manager form of government?
I love home rule. So I am an attorney, and I worked for the city of Chicago for a couple of years. So I'm very familiar with how home rule can be used advantageously for municipalities. Home rule is uncommon in the United States, and it allows municipalities a lot of leeway in making their own decisions. Home rule is part of the Illinois Constitution, and I think it's an important part. It allows municipalities to address specific concerns specific to our community. And I would like to see Evanston use home rule a lot more, specifically towards Northwestern University, who I think takes advantage of their relationship with the city of Evanston. I would like to see the city do a lot more to get Evanston or get Northwestern to the table to make a significant contribution to the costs of running Evanston day to day. About a manager style of government, it has some benefits. It's certainly efficient. There's some dependability. When you look at continuity of services, city services, what we expect out of a municipal government is a lot of day-to-day nuts and bolts. You want your streets up and running. You want utilities, water, garbage, streets and sand, traffic lights. So from a manager style of government, it makes sense that those things aren't going to change every 4 years, that there's a municipal election where priorities are going to change. It allows you to have a longer span to address the day-to-day needs of a community. I get that. I think there are some challenges. One is a lack of accountability. The city manager is not an elected position. And I think the structure of that government, style of government, it doesn't encourage citizens to be involved in the decision-making process, and doesn't encourage the leadership, the city manager's office, to involve citizens in the decision-making process. So that doesn't mean that they don't, but structurally it's less important. I think it's, in a way, somewhat undemocratic. And it allows elected representatives to kind of pass the buck too, to not take responsibility and say, it's not in my purview, that's in the city manager's office, this is the style of government. So that said, we do have a manager style of government, and I'd like to see a lot of engagement between city council and the mayor's office and the city manager's office. I think there's room for robust involvement with elected officials and the manager's office.
Thank you. So the next question came to us on the subject of the environment. Evanston has the Climate Action Resilience Plan with the goal of a carbon neutral Evanston by 2050, as well as some goals leading up to it. What do you feel are the biggest challenges we face in reaching that goal? And do you think that the current goal is too ambitious or not ambitious enough, or would you like to see it changed?
I fully support the CART plan. I think it is ambitious, and I love it. I think Evanston should be a national leader in sustainability. I think Evanston should be a national leader in terms of equity, police reform, but specifically on the CART plan, it's aggressive, and at this point, it's just a plan. It's going to be up to the next council and the councils following to implement that plan. And having a lot of experience in government work, the devil is in the details, right? Like what can we get done, how and when is going to determine the success going forward to 2030, 2050. And I think too, reevaluating the needs and interests of the community and the global community are also important to take into account.
So what would you say is the biggest challenge we face in reaching that goal?
Carbon neutrality will be difficult. Also, when you get into actual alternative energy, implementation is hard. I think you know how you can buy offsets or a percentage of how much of your electricity comes from renewable resources, but the actual energy that you get isn't necessarily from a renewable resource unless you yourself have control over that renewable resource. So, if we're serious about having renewable energy, do we have the means to create that renewable energy? It would be an exciting opportunity, something I'm certainly interested in, but it would be very expensive.
So the next question concerns the budget. Do you feel overall that expenditures by the city of Evanston over the last 4 years have appropriately reflected the priorities, needs, and interests of Evanston residents?
Generally, I think Evanston does a good job. I think I support kind of some of what you hear from the Evanston Black Lives Matter of reallocating police resources towards more social services. That makes sense to me, and I think makes sense to a lot of Evanstonians. I think we can rethink public safety while prioritizing safety, while also prioritizing individuals in distress and systemic problems that could be headed off. I think it's very important that we don't get myopic on addressing public safety just as a policing issue. And I would like to see the Evanston budget reflect more creative thinking when it comes to public safety.
Okay. Even before the pandemic, it seemed as though downtown Evanston was full of empty storefronts. And of course, the pandemic has just exacerbated this. What do you believe can be done to promote development in a way that prioritizes small business and local ownership?
Yeah, I would love and fully support revitalized downtown Evanston. And I think part of that is supporting the businesses that are there, and that gets the ball rolling towards enticing other businesses to be a part of it. I'm certainly in favor of incentivizing small business opportunities in downtown Evanston, and also supporting the patronization of businesses in Evanston. Patronizing and really making it a community value to support local business and support our friends and neighbors who create businesses in Evanston.
Do you have any specifics for how you'd like to promote small business and local ownership?
No.
Okay. All right. So our next question, moving away from commercial development to residential development. Despite the number of new residential units constructed in Evanston over the last few years, especially in some of the high rises that have come up downtown, housing costs in Evanston continue to rise. Do you feel that the inclusionary housing ordinance is doing enough to combat this? Or what other solutions would you like to see implemented?
I don't think that the inclusionary housing ordinance does enough. That said, it's a good start. And I think it's a good start in reflecting our community values, that affordable housing is something we as a community value and think is important, and as important as our community identity is the mixed socioeconomic levels is a strength that Evanston has. It should be an affordable place to live that working folks are part of, and they don't get priced out of town. So that said, I think the ordinance is a start in the right direction. I think it's too easy for bigger developers to pay the fine and opt out. I think it seems to me that it's more geared towards big development and less geared towards smaller development, affordable housing, and encouraging kind of naturally occurring affordable housing in neighborhoods. And I think that's specifically important in the 8th Ward. The 8th Ward is mostly residential, very many naturally occurring affordable housing and multi-unit buildings. And we need to support that. Also make sure that there's landlords who are not abusive, use our city resources to check landlords who are not living up to our expectations, and to incentivize folks, nonprofits, for-profit landlords who do a good job of creating that affordable housing.
So the next question, I had reached out to a Ward 8 resident who's a member. We wanted to, see if they wanted to put in a specific question for the Ward 8 candidates. And this was, this came in even before the tragedy yesterday night. But I think that really just, raises the question even more. So the question from the resident was, the sound of gunfire is frequently heard in this neighborhood. Gun violence has been an issue here for a long time. What can be done about it that isn't already being done?
It's true. We as the 8th Ward have a problem with gun violence. Yesterday was particularly tragic. I think what we can do and should do, need to do more of, is community engagement. Community policing, I think the work that Kevin Brown did with the Youth and Young Adult Services Division did a very good job of reaching out to and targeting into high-risk individuals and trying to get them off that path where gun violence is an option. Gun violence should not be an option in our community. And I think we as a community need to instill that in everybody. And from a policing perspective, do more community policing where the police on the street know the individuals on the street, know what's going on, and hopefully can divert folks who might go down that path of using gun violence in our community in a different direction.
Thank you. So the next few questions are ones that I like to ask all of the non-incumbents. So the first one is why aldermen? So there's many different races on the ballot this cycle. Why was it that you chose aldermen to run for?
I really care about local politics and see that that's where I can be the most effective and make the most change. I think Evanston is a prime example of how we can make changes at the local level that can spread. And the form of government that we have with a weak mayor, a city manager, and 9 aldermen, the aldermen have a lot of power and in the decision making about how change can actually happen. And that's what I'm excited about.
Okay. So another thing I like to ask all of the challengers, you're running against Rainey, who's been alderman for quite some time. What's one decision that she's made that you would agree with?
Anne was instrumental in a senior affordable housing project that started construction on Howard Street at the old Dairy Queen, which has been vacant for many years. So I fully support that project. I'm really glad the work that she did, and as alderman would continue to support that project.
Thank you. I had one final question for you before I opened it to questions from the viewers. Although the first question that came in from a viewer is much along the same lines. We're the Democratic Party of Evanston, and while we were preparing for this interview, the question came up of a vote in the Republican, for the Republican candidate in 2012. So the way it's worded, and I'll read it off the way it's worded in chat here. Given the hate-filled attacks of yesterday and the last 4 years of racism run amok, do you regret supporting the Republican Party in 2012? That's follow-up for other candidates. So is that something that you'd like to address to the Democratic Party of Evanston audience?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I am a lifelong progressive Democrat. I have voted Democratic, since I turned 18. In 2012, I did vote Republican in one presidential primary. President Obama was running unopposed, so there was nothing at the top of that ticket. The down ballot in the Democratic primary was problematic, and I strategically, it's called strategic or tactical voting, chose to vote the Republican ballot in order to vote for a less likely Republican a weaker candidate for President Obama to run against. I subsequently voted for President Obama in the actual election. I worked for and supported the Obama campaign in 2008, 2012. And the down ballot race was the 10th House congressional race. But I supported the 10th Democratic congressional person that was next on the ballot, Pamela Reeves-Harris. I supported her and worked on her campaign.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions coming from our members in chat. So Matthew, I wanted to thank you for joining us today, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Anybody watching, there's a primary in the 8th Ward race, and that's going to be on February 23rd. Early voting and vote by mail are going to be available, and I would really appreciate the vote of any 8th Ward voter.